I'm Nicole Carter, and we're very pleased that you've joined us for this session in the DWG Institute's educational schedule, where our mission is to guide you in your technology evaluation journey. I'm here with my co-host, Kevin Ope, and with the support from many of our DWG team spread across 2 continents. Our topic today looks at how the post-pandemic workplace will have mobility, flexibility, and inclusivity at its core. However, to make hybrid work a success, organizations will need to find new ways to keep employees connected, engaged, and productive. We are joined by Unily, along with Hong Kong's flag-carrying airline, Cathay Pacific, to share exclusive insights into how they have used the Unily platform to empower the hybrid workforce of tomorrow with a mobile-first intranet, which was recently selected by Nielsen Norman Group as one of the 10 best intranets of 2021. We'll be asking how this technology is being used to create an inclusive employee experience that drives business impact from headquarters to 40,000 feet in the air. Before we dive into our discussions, I'll hand over to our technical producer, Rose Miller, to make sure everyone is set up comfortably with WebEx. Over to you, Rose.
Thank you, Nicole. So we are using WebEx today. We advise that you set the WebEx to full screen, which you can do by clicking on the right-hand floating view icon in the top right of your screen. And if you'd like to set the WebEx so that you can see the participant list and chat as well as the presentation, then just click the side-by-side view icon in the top right there. We'd love you to get involved today, so please do pop any insights or questions into the chat during the session, and we'll feed those into the conversation through the chat panel. If you're asked to come off mute, then simply press the unmute button at the bottom of your screen or next to your name in the participant list. And if you need any technical help during the session, just right click on my name, Rose Miller, and I'll be here to help throughout. And if you can't get back into the WebEx at all, then please reply to the calendar invitation that you were sent earlier, and I'll just help you from there. And lastly, just to flag that we are recording today's session and all material presented remains strictly confidential. I'll hand back to you, Nicole, to kick us off through with the agenda.
Okay, thanks, Rose. So now let's set the scene and clarify expectations for everyone. We try to make DWG Institute events interactive, yet we also want to learn from our expert experienced guests, so we have to strike a balance. Today, our main session will be 1 hour long, covering quite a bit of ground and featuring 3 different speakers. So to manage the timing and flow of the programme, we invite you to engage in the chat panel, as Rose has said, with our DWG Executive Director, Ed Taylor. We'll try and answer some of your questions in the chat as well. But at the end of the session, we have the optional overtime, which we hope that people can stay on for that, because that's where a lot of the deep dive discussion will take place. But we appreciate some people have only got an hour that they can carve out of their day. But during the main hour, we will have a short time to be able to answer some questions that will be focused on the detail Cathay Pacific have shared. In the optional overtime, you'll be able to answer much more specific questions to the Unily product, and Matthew will be staying around for that, so you can ask him as many questions as you like. I think you should really test him. But anyway, let's get started. Over to you, Kevin. We lost Kevin, is on mute.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
So I did that. So now our guests will not feel embarrassed if they do it later on. I'm talking to you from beautiful Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where it's about 8 a.m. in the morning. Our first guest today is Matthew Boyd. He's a product evangelist at Unily. Matt will also bring in the team from Cathay Pacific. Carly Nankin, Head of Internal Communications Engagement. Hi, Carly.
Everyone.
Stephen Yong, Head of Digital Experience, Insights, and Governance.
Hi, Kevin. Hey.
And they're going to explain their insight of using Unily to reach and engage 26,000 employees, whether they're working from home, based in airports, or connected mid-flight. Hey, Matt, where are you talking to us from today?
I'm coming from the southwest of the UK, down near Winchester. It's pretty nice weather too.
So I'm thinking mid-afternoon, right?
Absolutely mid-afternoon, and it's a glorious day actually.
Well, thank you so much for being with us here today. I'm looking forward to hearing what you all are going to share with us. And Matt, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kevin. So I'm just going to begin by sharing my screen. And hopefully that will then pop up for everybody.
Yeah, that's good. We can see that.
Perfect. Off to a good start, I would say. So, yeah, then kind of getting into it. So, just before we kind of hop into the main content with Cathay Pacific, just wanted to give you a little bit of information about Unily. So, who is Unily? We are an employee experience platform provider, so focused on delivering solutions like intranets and employee engagement solutions on the cloud. Been doing that for a large number of years now. Unily is both the name of our organization and our platform. I'm based out of the UK, but we do have a global distribution. So you can see a couple of other offices there. We've got now closer to 3.5 million users on our platform around the world, and a couple of our industry recognized security accreditations too. And final thing before we hop into the content, just wanted to say, for those of you who enjoy today's session, we would encourage you to consider signing up for Unite 21, which is our employee experience and employee engagement conference, which we live streamed from 2 studios, one in New York, one in London. We are going to be joined by Ed Taylor from the DWG group as well. He'll be coming and speaking at that conference, another great partnership opportunity for us, which we're really excited about. And if you like these kind of employee experience, employee engagement case studies, there'll be loads more of those and other great content. So look out for that. But now into the kind of core content, and skipping over the agenda, which we've kind of looked at briefly already. Let's hop into talking a little bit about Cathay Pacific. So Stephen, Carly, actually maybe Stephen, if I throw to you first, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your role at Cathay Pacific, and then Carly, over to you afterwards, and tell us a little bit about your role at Cathay Pacific, and maybe give us a rundown of the organization.
Sure. All right, I'll start. So I look after the digital initiatives and drive digital initiatives to improve employee experience for Cathay. So we sort of look at it holistically from hire to retire, the whole employee journey. And we look at digital initiatives that can make the employee experience a lot more seamless, a lot more efficient. Yeah, so that's the objective. I also sort of look at employee data analytics as well. So we try to get some insights to further improve the employee experience. And the last part of my role is really looking at the data governance. So obviously it's all good to have all the employee data, but how do we abide to the right governance? How do we retain the data and so forth? So yeah, so that's what I do for Cathay.
Thanks. And then Carly, over to you. Perhaps you could tell us that and then lead into a little bit about the organization.
Sure, Matt. So I look after the internal communications and engagement for the airline. So everything from keeping our employees updated to what is going on across the business, from news, information, important updates, to our channel management and general content agenda. That also includes recognition and our recognition platforms, which we have a few. We run many events for our employees. And I guess kind of what Stephen said around the whole employee experience is, how do we create experiences for our employees to keep them engaged and connected at work, which is so important and even critical now, as we're all working from home. So it's even more important.
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely.
a bit about me.
And then perhaps then you could tell us a little bit about the organization as well.
Yeah, of course. So we are a global airline based in Hong Kong. We've been around 70 years now with about 20,000 employees. 70% of those actually are what we call our remote workforce. That's made up of cabin crew, pilots, airport colleagues, really a whole lot of people based around the world. So as you can imagine, people are not connected to a desk like sometimes Stephen and I are, based in a head office role. We've been through a significant amount of change over the last 5 years. Large part of that is to really modern, innovate, change the way our organization is focused around doing everything for the customer. So a real customer-centric approach. But then equally, we match that with the employee experience. So our kind of vision, I guess, for our people is giving them the same care and attention, same attention and care to our employees as we do for our customers.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. And you touched on a few things there, and I suppose this ties into what we're going to talk about today, renovating the kind of employee experience, or maybe more accurately overhauling it. But what kind of, so given the unique structure of the airline industry, and given you mentioned the recent challenges that you face, can you tell us a little bit about the employee experience challenges you face as an organization, and how that kind of led you to kind of take a look at your existing systems and understand the need for a new one?
I can take that. So,
Great.
yeah, I think for us initially, before we started this program, it was very much a one-sided sort of communication channel that we had. So it was basically publishing information for people to access. So there wasn't much of a two-way communications. And then on top of that, we had a very old, I think, technology as well that was very static, and it was actually really difficult to find information. So what that the result of that is that people would just go to this specific link to get something, and they'll be out of there. So there's no real engagement as such with our old platform.
Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
which you've got it up there. Yeah.
Absolutely. So like, I know we talked about some of these pain points before, and we've kind of discussed these, but like, obviously you talked about that frontline remote workforce, and then you also mentioned there was like a lack of mobile access, which kind of I suppose that led to a significant barrier to communicating effectively with those remote workers. And I know that at Cathay Pacific you had a really strong focus on the kind of cultural aspects of engaging your people, and how that influenced the customer experience at the end of it as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of the challenges that we see here around the kind of adoption levels and the communications?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at that, I mean, it's not that long ago we were actually using that, and you can see it's almost impossible if you sort of just came into the organization and wanting to find something. It's pretty much linked everywhere. And the other thing as well is a lot of the content is not really relevant to me. So you can see you need to go through a lot of pages, a lot of clicks before you actually find something that's actually relevant to you. So that obviously was a huge pain point for us. And then, yeah, like the mobile bit was a big piece. So I think when we were using this old intranet, you wouldn't want to access it on your mobile. There was no way you could actually see any of the text, and yeah, it was just not mobile friendly at all. So that was definitely one of the key pain points. And also with our old intranet, a lot of the content were not really up to date. The style, the tone of voice is quite different across different pages as well. So you might be browsing through content that hasn't been updated for like 10 years, and no one has actually gone in to do any updates. There's no governance around it. So yeah, that was something that we needed to improve as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when you look at the system, it's certainly, from a user experience standpoint, it doesn't necessarily scream modern. And things like a lack of rich media for capturing user attention, and delivering kind of detail in that way. I know were some challenging areas there as well. Now, obviously, some of this you can tell, just by looking at the screen and kind of talking about the UX and kind of the fact it wasn't very personal, and didn't have the mobile access. But can you tell us a little bit about how you went about validating the needs for a replacement system before you kind of got to picking a tool or whatever? How do you validate these pain points?
Yeah, so one of the key things that we did actually was, and this was right at the start of the program, was we got a core team together to basically define what are our goals and what are our priorities, because there's going to be a lot of things that everyone wants to achieve, but I think it was very important for us to understand what are our key priorities. So we did have a lot of workshops to agree on that. We also did some studies on how other organizations are doing, what are the best practices out there. So we actually spend a bit of time to look at that and sort of then filter it to see what is relevant to us and what is important to us. And then once we have our goals and priorities sort of defined, the other key, I think, worth mentioning thing that we did was around our user journey workshops. So what we did was we actually grouped our employees to key user groups. So for example, the pilots will be one of the key user groups, cabin crew, people at the back office, and so forth. So we had different personas. And what we did was we actually had workshops with all the different personas, and we actually mapped out their user journey. So before they came to work, what were the things that they needed? For example, what content would they look at? What were some of the applications they might need to be accessing? And then we sort of mapped to say, okay, when they are at work, what are the content and what are the applications that they need? And after work, after when they leave work, what are some of the content and stuff that they would sort of need? So we had that user journey mapped for all the different key personas that we've got in the organization. And that was very useful because then that gave us a blueprint to say that when we do implement a new intranet, it had to meet these user journey requirements because this is what they would come to the platform for. So, yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of new intranets, perhaps we should take a little look. If I go over one slide here. So, you know, obviously having understood these pain points and the challenges, you know, especially with the, you know, distributed remote workforce and, you know, the changes around, you know, new hybrid ways of working as well, which we'll come on to later. You obviously went out and chose to partner with Unily, and it's you know, it's been awesome. And of course, you won a coveted, globally recognized Intranet Design Award for Best Intranet Design with the Nielsen Norman Group too. So perhaps you can now tell us a little bit about, you know, the new platform, and take us through some of the really important features of what you built out here.
Sure, I can take that one, Stephen. And I will just say, like, first up, I mean, it's just been such a game changer for us. I mean, it's completely, you know, repositioned the way that we are able to connect with our employees, which, you know, coming from the comms team is just absolutely critical. And I think COVID's, you know, been even more important on that bucket. So, you know, where we kind of started, I guess, Matt, just to kind of go back to our vision, right? It was to create this world-class, really easy to use, personalized digital portal that totally transformed the way that we interacted with employees, or rather that they interacted with the business. So there's kind of a number of key factors that we were looking for. And I'll come to those defining points in a second, but a powerful search tool for us was really critical. Going back to our old intranet, I mean, it was just so old and outdated. You know, you just couldn't search, which we know, like, it's so important in today's world. We are a really large, complex, complicated organization. So giving people what they need when they need it was vital, and making it easy to find all of that. Documents as well. Document search is a really big part of the hub, which we call it. I guess, again, just going back to the nature of our industry, giving employees access to policies, guidelines, forms, you know, whatever it is in the form of a document was, again, just so important. And again, making it easy for them to find what they're looking for. Another important part was obviously just this sophisticated, easy to use comms tool that had rich media, that gave people access to information when they needed it. You know, we could share news, we could share updates, we can share push notifications. You know, there's different ways of actually delivering content to our employees. So yeah, just a really systematic, organized way of curating content ultimately. But I would say when it comes to those really defining factors for us, the personalization was absolutely critical. So, you know, Stephen kind of talked to a little bit, we actually started with 7 different homepage personas. So if you think about the experience of a cabin crew versus an airport colleague versus Stephen and I who sit in our head office, our day-to-day is just so different, right? So, you've got cabin crew who come into the office, they do their checks, and then they're straight onto the aircraft, right? And then they leave and go back home. So their whole journey, what they do, what they're looking for is vastly different to Stephen and I's. So when we designed their homepage, that looked really different, from personalized news and information through to having their rosters, front and center, which is what they look for day to day. So just really thinking through what makes that layout and design unique. We're having some core, central widgets, as we call them, or features that look similar across all the different groups, but giving it enough personalization. So that was the first point. And then I would say the second thing for us is that mobile application. So again, going back to, we've got 70% of our workforce, which is remote. So they don't use desktop. So they needed to have mobile access, really easy to use. Again, I come back to like push notifications and sending information to those core groups was another really important factor for us. So, you're on the go, you've just got to have that kind of one-tap access. So yeah, I think that's probably key for us, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, you can see just by looking at the kind of side by side, this is probably for me one of the most rewarding parts of working with clients, is to see the before and after shots, the transformation from the homepage, which is a library of links, to that living, breathing homepage, which is really centered on each user's day-to-day requirements. The roster piece for frontline staff, I'm sure your people would attest to it, but I can already see how powerful that must be for them, where they're one-stop shop, and it tells them where they need to be, when, what flights they're on, and this kind of as well translating to that mobile experience. So it's not only kind of tailored to the requirements of those different user groups, but also built up around the kind of technology and the devices that are prevalent for those audiences as well. I think is a really powerful part of what you've managed to achieve here.
So, Carly,
absolutely.
I'd like to jump in with a quick question, because first of all, I'm so impressed, Carly, with a lot of folks do the persona work, but it's really clear from looking at what you have here that you've actually used the output of that persona work to create vastly different interfaces for people based upon their vastly different jobs, right? And I guess my question is that in the old days, when we were all building digital workplaces, that would be incredibly expensive I mean, it's essentially two very different interfaces. Was that a big budget hit, or is that one of the things about the tools that you're using that allows this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can build as many persona homepages as you like ultimately, which is fantastic. And that was a big tick for us. We actually started with 7 persona homepages, and we're now down to 5. So, the beauty of the platform is that you can pick and choose, however many you like ultimately. And it has changed since we launched the platform 2 years ago. I will just say, with the whole persona pages, it is a lot of work to set that out up front, right? It took a lot of time, care, as Stephen said, going through the different experiences and really mapping that out with the different groups took a lot of time and effort. But I will say it's absolutely been well worth it. And if you have audience groups that are so different, like Cathay or like the airline industry, it is a worthwhile exercise going down that path.
That's really interesting, Carly, because I know people will be asking about team and things, and Matthew's going to get into that a little bit later. But just knowing that the return on investment in putting that input in at the beginning pays off is really good to know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I honestly, I think if we just had one homepage, I don't think it would work, because we need to give different audience groups a reason to come there, right? So if it was just, Hong Kong head office centric, even news as an example, I mean, it just the kind of pull factor wouldn't be there as well. So you've got to think about that kind of pull and push at the same time.
And that's what I was going to say, Carly, is like when Kevin asked the question, it didn't cost money, but it definitely cost time.
Absolutely.
which leads me nicely onto the team that are behind the scenes, pulling all the strings and making this kind of incredible solution work. Can you tell us a little bit about, and the army seems like an appropriate phrase now, given all the work that's gone in. Can you tell us a little bit about the team behind the hub?
Sure. So we've got cross-functional teams that were involved. So the core team, we had a really good representation from comms team, from the digital team, and also from IT as well. I think actually that was pretty critical because there was quite a bit of integration with Office 365, and hence we needed that expertise to be able to get all this set up and working. So that was, yeah, it was crucial to have that core team. And also apart from the core team, we've also got a network of what we call like hub champions across the organization. So every department has a hub champion rep, which we would then work with them to guide them on how to build their page, how do you design it so that it's all aligned across the platform. And they are also our key advocates. So they would then go to the department, they would sort of teach people how to use it, where to find things. So no, it worked really well actually with the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something which, again, I think is another great hallmark of success for projects like this. It's the collaboration between the technical and non-technical side of the business. Making sure that you have the support from technical sponsors within the business, I think is important, because there are going to be elements of the technology which do require that kind of technical input. When you're doing your first kind of configuration, around getting everyone's user profiles in the system, for example, and giving them the power to log in, really easily, things like that. So I think that for me, I think was really great to see. And obviously the hub champions, I think, is another really cool and powerful initiative as well. I think making sure that you get those advocates in place across the business is really important. Can you tell us a little bit as well, just if you can, about the the stakeholders in the project? Just interested to know, with such lofty goals and aspirations to kind of revolutionize this and really drive your culture home. I often hear the question, about leadership buy-in. So, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the stakeholders.
So for this program of work, we've actually got the buy-in from our CEO itself. So it did go up right to the top. There was a lot of time that was spent in really making them understand the value of doing this. Why is this important? How is this going to drive engagement? And they got it. And once they got it, they then empowered us to sort of go out to the wider organization to drive the message as well. So I think we had quite a lot of workshops. You would remember, Kali, with all the general managers and directors, telling them, look, this is important. Why do you need to get your content updated? And they did. And with that buy-in, they then gave resources to help build this whole thing. So yeah, it was very important actually.
I think probably critical to the success, if I might just add, because the hub is certainly not the comms team and the digital team behind this. It really is, when you say, Matt, an army of people. That's absolutely true. We rely on those people to keep the hub updated, fresh. That kind of governance piece is so important to the success of it overall, that we really needed that piece done well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that it wasn't just about securing that time commitment up front for the original creation of content. You mentioned one of the pain points of the old system was content hadn't really been updated and maintained. So, you had to get that time commitment going forwards to maintain that content as well. Is that right?
Yes. So we've got what we call the governance sort of set up before we rolled out as well, because there's no point just implementing it and then everything just goes out of control again. So we had to ensure that there was a governance in place. So hence, this is where the hub champions are very critical, because they would be the person that we would go to ensure that the pages or the sites that they're accountable for are up to date. And then throughout the year, we have actually marked in, we do audits as well, where we would actually just to do a check to say, hey, are the content up to date? Do you need any further assistance to help improve your sites and so forth? So that's part of the governance, yeah.
Yeah,
It's not necessarily
absolutely.
policing people, right? It's about empowering them and just reminding them that, you know, we want this tool to be great for everyone. So, you know, part of that is maintaining it and making it look fresh. And, you know, it's hard when, you know, it's not your day-to-day job to give it time and attention. So it just kind of puts it on their, I guess, their roadmap for that period, which is really helpful.
Yeah, and we do make it fun sometimes, where you know whichever department that actually updates the pages first, they keep it up to date. We give them prizes, so there's a little bit of bribing going on as well. Yeah.
Nice. No, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. I mean, and ultimately, Cathay have a really positive culture. So I think bringing those fun elements through the technology, like an amazing way to go about it as well. I think people far too often shy away from governance, but you're proving that it doesn't have to be a bad word. So I guess then looking forwards, I guess, really, and talking about more recently, obviously working in the aviation industry, a significant event recently has impacted your business. We talk about COVID-19 and the significant essentially global halt of international travel. I know that you really made the most of the technology to try and support your people. Can you tell us a little bit about how you responded to the pandemic and how the tool kind of helped you in that kind of plight?
Yeah, sure, Matt, I can talk to that. So, I mean, to be honest, I don't think we could have done it without the hub. I would have been quite worried from a comms perspective if we didn't have a platform like this, because I think there was so much that has gone on for us over the last 18 months, from keeping employees updated with reactive news and information. There were guidelines that changed, policy documents, cleaning procedures, safety standards. There's just like so much has hit our organization that what we created was this COVID corner, and that was front and center from the homepage. Different groups had their own versions of this, but it told you what was happening, forms you maybe needed to complete. If you had COVID, well, what do you need to tell the business if you're a close contact with someone? Questions to our medical team, what goes on board at the airport. I mean, there was just so much that had to be shared and updated. So we built that, and that's where we shared all of our information. So I'd say that was your kind of reactive part of COVID, and that's just an ongoing beast that we maintain every day, if not multiple times a day, unfortunately. But it has really, really helped us in many ways. And then I would say the other part is kind of your kind of this idea of uniting a recovery, a campaign to pull everyone together. We've had to do a real push in our organization to get people vaccinated. Obviously, the quicker we do that, the quicker we can get back in the air. So, part of it is just sharing positive stories, why you want to fly again, how do we build this, you come back to culture, but this positive way of reuniting the organization. So we developed what we call our Arms Up campaign, which has competitions and, as I said, stories and all sorts of positive stuff for us. So again, that's just been really helpful. And the campaign side of it, I would say, is another really great feature of the platform for us. Campaign year, so kind of help pull everything together and be a bit of the kind of glue, so to speak, when there's big stuff going on in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally think this is fantastic. I think we actually kind of measured some statistics around usage of the platform at the start of the pandemic. It broadly anonymized data across our wide customer base. And we actually saw that searches for terms like COVID and COVID-19 at the start of the pandemic like skyrocketed in the intranet. And what that told us was that the employees around the world for organizations in every industry, not just the airline industry, but across all industries, were searching for answers and for information from their business. And I think it was such a powerful message, really, that you'd kind of already gone, well, actually, you don't need to search because we're going to give you the COVID corner. You know you can go there. You know it's trusted. You benefited, of course, from having a new technology which didn't carry the kind of legacy pain and lack of trustworthiness. So you're able to say, you know, with real gusto, you can trust the information you find here and equip people. And then this, again, I think just speaks to the great positive cultural impact, the kind of bringing people together around the vaccination program. You know, really a really positive message about, you know, returning to the skies, I think. So I'm certainly looking forward to flying again. So
Aren't we
really
all?
good. Yeah, exactly. But then I know the story then goes, you know, one step further, and we talked about, you know, hybrid working, you know, as part of the title of this session. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how you, you know, built up information and content around new ways of working going forwards in light of the pandemic.
So yeah, so we've started with remote working options as well for the organization, where a team could do a couple of days working from home. Now, to do that, the hub has actually become even more important because it needs to have a single source for them to get information. And it's all, apart from just information, there's also the social elements of it. So I think what we are going to explore a bit more is how do we use the hub more for social as well. Employee recognition, Carly talked a bit about as well. What are some of the things that we can use the hub, for example, to do more recognition of peer-to-peer, for example, and also like tribes. I think it's creating more of a sense of belonging, because when you're not in the office, you're not with the team the whole time. So it's sort of important to try and get sort of like the community, a sense of belonging to it as well. So that's definitely what we're going to be working on more, I think, as part of the work your way / remote working. Yeah.
And then I know you also have this embracing a digital future side of things as well.
Yes. So we've got a whole roadmap of things coming with the digital part. Now, I think from the hub perspective, there are definitely a few key things that we want to focus on. I think search, as what we mentioned before, is critical. How do we make it better? I think everyone's so used to searching in Google, so that's sort of the expectation that we kind of have to meet. So we're definitely going to focus a lot more on how do we fine tune, whether it's our naming convention, how do we put information so that people can search for things a lot easier. We would also definitely want to explore what are some of the functions that we can sort of integrate with the hub. So for example, if I've got a training system that tells me I've got all these upcoming training, it would be really nice if those information is displayed as soon as I get into the hub as well, just as a reminder to tell me these are the things that are coming up for me. So we want to look at integration. And the last bit, definitely it's on the analytics. So you've got all this data in terms of employee engagement, for people coming into the hub, what are the things that they're viewing, what are they interested in? How do we then sort of link those information to other broader employee data like performance and so forth? So do we see any correlation between employee engagement with performance? So it can be quite exciting insights, I think we'll want to drive out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've touched on a few things there actually around, you know, your future for the hub as well. I know you talked a little bit about, you know, improving search and kind of the integration aspect. I guess one of the really powerful things you did off the bat for that large frontline workforce was the roster integration, of course, and the fact that that's actually woven into the notification framework as well. So that kind of like is not just go to the hub to see, but actually getting notified through the hub about roster changes, like that integration, much deeper than, you know, a surface level, feed or something like that,
Yeah.
but actually kind of, quite a deep integration there that you've already achieved. So I'm sure any other aspirational integrations with the hub will be equally exciting. Carly, perhaps you could tell us, a little bit, about vision for the future, and then maybe even start to touch on some of the lessons learned over the course of the project.
Yeah, sure. I mean, vision for the future for us, kind of leading on from what Stephen said, from a comms perspective, it's just becoming more sophisticated, probably more personalized. There's lots of cool new features that have come out from the Unily platform, so it's just tapping into that and building on it. Really, we are a global organization. We've got people based in airports around the world. So, recent conversation we've been having is, do we have regional homepages? So that might add, 7 different ones, or potentially going down to country level. Not saying we would do that by any means, but it's definitely exploring, just being more sophisticated and powerful with it. As Stephen kind of touched on as well, the social aspect of the hub. I think there's huge potential with that. Building different communities. I think we'd love this to be a place, it is the kind of single source of truth at Cathay, so to speak, which is great. But how do we now kind of build that online community, I would say? That's kind of the next stage for us, next piece.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this a lot, and I kind of summarize this as how you convert what I call the passive visitors, those people who arrive, view, and then get on with whatever else they're doing in other systems, to the actively engaged. They're engaged with the content maybe, but are they exercising their voice? Are they, reacting to content, sharing a small part of their emotional response to content in the platform and things like that? So I think that's like
absolutely
a
has it
natural
become more
evolution.
two-way? Yeah, exactly. And how do we get more leaders on board as well? We've been throwing around a few ideas, but for example, launching this leadership corner on the hub, to try build more of a voice from kind of senior management and get that kind of two-way dialogue going. I think that's huge potential there.
And I'm sure before long you'll be able to retire the COVID corner and then bring the leadership corner in to replace it, and it'll be a really good,
fingers crossed, Matt.
a really good,
we all
really
hope
good
for
transition. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So what I always like to do, because I know that it's not a huge amount of time to cover a whole kind of intranet story, but what I always like to do, when we get to the kind of these end portions, is ask you whether or not you could share one piece of advice for our audience today, before we kind of jump into a more kind of free-form Q&A. What one piece of advice would you give to everyone who's thinking about a new employee experience platform, a new intranet? Maybe it'd be something you would have done differently, and maybe not, but one piece of advice from each of you. Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Are you?
Okay, I'll go. Yeah.
You go, Ben.
I think definitely spend time and effort to think about what are your priorities. I think a mistake that you could make is trying to build something and everything at one go. I think it's important to always remember this is an evolving platform. So you should start out with something that is core, which is your priority, and you sort of then build on top of it, and you slowly expand your scope of work. I think, that would be the right approach, I would think.
100%. I think, it's critical to be iterative, because, first and foremost, you shouldn't try and boil the ocean. That is, even with a whole army, that could be all consuming. But, more than that, the employee experience changes in response to factors in the world, in the environment, in the organizational change that you experience. So as you've demonstrated, you had something set up, but you were able to pivot during the pandemic and provide new experiences, new content, new information to respond to that change. And so the employee experience is iterative by the very nature of the fact that, we're always experiencing that change. So I completely agree. I think that's it. You start with start with that core. That's great advice. What about you, Carly? What piece of advice or
Yeah,
can you
sure.
give?
Kind of in a similar light, to be honest. I think it's about balancing having enough resources, time, energy to get it right and get it right when you launch and then keep it going. But at the same
Mm,
time, keeping it agile. Because
mm,
I think the great thing about the hub is you can change things so quickly. You can reconfigure your homepage, you can switch things around, and that's kind of part of the beauty of it. So I think it's a fine line to kind of keep that balance. But
yeah.
I think it has been part of our success. I'm not, as we kind of said, there's this army of people that make it happen, and you need the processes and governance and time to plan accordingly. And it's really important, I would say, to get that right up front.
Mm.
I mean, Stephen, we had, gosh, Matt, I can't even remember, but we had so many months, and it still felt like, we could have many months more.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you always want more time, but there comes a point where it's not about getting it perfect, right? It is about, just as Stephen said, like, you learn as you go. And I think we're still learning, 2.5 years in, or 2 years in, sorry, what makes it work, what people connect with, what's right for different groups. So I think you just got to keep that balance with then, just building and keeping it fresh and new over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think those are two solid pieces of advice. I think, the agility piece is critical. And I think that is ultimately, a big part of the way the internet market is moving. I think, is these kind of trying to provide these platforms which don't represent a point in time reflection of your requirements, again, because your business is changing and so are the needs of your people. And that's probably why, I wouldn't make a great internet manager, because it's so easy. I would be changing things all the time. And throw the governance rule book out the window. I'd be like, maybe I'll move that over here and see how that goes. But but no, it's good. And do you know, when you talked about the agility, Carly, the one thing I was thinking there as well was actually, you did the 7 home pages, but then you had the ability to wind back from that and say, well, actually, there is a balance between planning and time it takes to maintain versus the reward that you get out of the end of that. And you were able to wind back from that just as quickly. So you get that kind of ability to trial different approaches as well, and kind of do that kind of A/B testing kind of scenarios. And then can always, put it to one side until it's needed later.
For sure.
And
Okay.
that's fantastic. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing your story with everyone. I think we've now got a good amount of time left to do some Q&A.
Yes, so thanks very much, Matt, Carly, and Stephen for this session. I mean, it was really, you've covered a lot in the time that we had there, and I know we've got some time for questions as well. So I was going to ask Matt, you what your lesson learned is, because you're used to doing these sessions for Unily, and I bet people don't really ask you that question. So, but what I'd like you to do, because we've got so many questions that have come in the chat for Cathay Pacific, that I want to keep the time for that, but I'd like you to write something in the chat. So this is your homework, So
perfect. I shall put something in the chat now.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got good learnings from your experience with the range of clients with Unily. So the first question I'm going to kick off is about homepages. So does each persona get a different homepage, or is the homepage the same, but you just serve up different content to them?
I can take this.
Take that.
It's actually different homepage. So obviously the branding and the color and that kind of thing, it's consistent across. But I would say it's actually a different homepage, and it's just not the content wise in terms of what information we're displaying, in terms of how things are laid out, and even the links to applications, for example, they're all quite different for all the different homepages.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is quite labor intensive then, because you're thinking about each thing. So there's a sort of lead on question from that. It's about what's the sort of split between your digital team and your comms team, and do you sit together virtually, or what's that?
Actually, we're neighbors. I sit
Just
right
by
next to
chance.
Carly. Yeah, just by chance we're neighbors. We've probably got about, I think, 2 to 3. So there's 2 to 3 people from the digital team and around 2 to 3 people from the comms team as well. That was the team that was working on the program.
Okay.
Yeah. But then, as mentioned, apart from us, there's IT as well, which had a few core team from IT. And we've got the wider sort of hub champion network as well, which sort of looks after their own pages.
So what do they do in relation to each other then? How's that sort of split work with the content? Does digital create the widgets and the pages, and comms fill that in for some of the pages, or what's the sort of split of the tasks between those two teams?
So comms definitely with the content, they would actually write the content for all the that's relevant to everyone, and they would also review content that were written by the departments as well. So that's from comms perspective. But actually, even when we were doing the program, comms and digital team actually worked together to come up with the design and the layout of the pages as well. So because there were all the different widgets and stuff that we needed to use, so I think it was a really good collaboration actually between both teams to agree on which widget to use, how is it appropriate in the layout of the pages and so forth.
No, that's good. I know we've got some content questions now, which sort of lead on for that. I think Kevin's going to.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. Yeah, the chat board has been on fire with content questions, and so starting off, and that's very common, right? We're all working for content is king, the things that people go there for. The question that's coming in, one from Adriana, how do you manage the governance of content creation and the approval chains, ensuring, and I'm going to tie in another question, how that content stays really fresh and up to date?
Take that one. So I think content for us is kind of split in two, I would say. So my team manages the day news information push that we put out, I guess, to our different audiences. That is largely the approval chain just sits with our team, so it's our responsibility to manage that. And check that, you know, the hub is looking good, there's nothing that's broken on the homepage, all of that. If we have an issue or a bug, that's where we go knocking on Stephen Team's door for help to fix that. We've then got, as we said, we've got the different persona homepage owners. So we've got then a comms lead that sits within different functions, and they're responsible for managing their content. So it might sound a bit complicated, but we have different kind of widgets that have your all company news, which we would push out. And then you've got your, we call them persona comms teams that manage specific news to their teams. And sometimes that has to go through approvals to director or GM, just depending on the nature of it. But we try to, I guess, simplify that as much as possible. So that's kind of that. We target news to different groups. So, you know, from all kind of, I guess, company-wide news, it might be only relevant to, let's just say, 4 of the homepage personas. So then we would just not push that out to those groups. And we would have those discussions with the relevant comms teams as to where content goes each week. So we have regular comms meetings for that. Then on the content, the static content, I would say, that sits on the hub. When we, I guess, created the hub, there was a big piece of work to go through the approval chain, so to speak, on that front, because we wanted content to be in the same style and tone and, you know, written in with one Cathay voice. So we offered a lot of support to our different departments to make sure that, you know, they kind of gave the basis of the content, but then we helped to edit and form it so that it was in the right style for us. And then the kind of governance piece that sits on top of that is through those regular audits that Stephen talked about earlier on. So we go to each department and we say, you know, what's going on, make sure it's up to date and it's fresh, and we go from there. Sorry, there's a lot in that question, but
oh, there was, and that's a great answer. Was there a lot of migration that had to happen from your past platform to this one, or are you basically trying to start from fresh?
It's a great question, to be honest. There was so much old and outdated content. Oh my God, so I can see Stephen laughing here as well. There was just pages and pages that I mean, I had a few people in my team just months and months just reviewing old content and then writing new content for pages. That was a huge amount of work.
It doesn't sound like you did a lift and shift. It sounds like it was more
Sorry, no,
managed,
no, we
right?
didn't. We definitely
Rewrite.
didn't. We had to keep some of it. Yeah, but we largely rewrote content. We rewrote the whole site.
And were there Unily resources that you used to be able to make that migration happen?
Yeah, I mean, Unily was the team was a critical part of that migration. Obviously, they couldn't write the content for us, but in terms of like how we got it over to the new site, for sure.
Stephen, did you
might
have
want
something?
to add?
No, I was just thinking about so we got everyone to make a list of content inventory from the old site. And they had to basically say which one is still relevant, which ones they needed to delete. And then for the relevant ones, we then said, all right, you need to rewrite this content to make sure it's aligned with the whole, So it was a huge exercise. It was.
I can see you still reliving the trauma there, Stephen.
I know.
I can feel that pain, you know.
It was
I
the
was
right
gonna ask-
decision, though. Yeah, it was the right decision.
Yep, we've got a ton more
That's when you
questions
need
on
those
here.
resources.
Yeah. We've got a ton more questions. I want to remind everyone that we've got another after-hours session coming up next, but I'm going to throw it back over to you, Nicole.
Yeah, I was going to ask one about hub champions. So you talked about the people that are looking after the news or the persona news. Are they the same people as the hub champions? And how did you find your hub champions? Did you and engage them and keep them engaged? Really, that's an interesting question, I think.
So the hub champions, we basically got the general manager for each department to nominate a hub champion. So it wasn't a voluntary thing. They were nominated. Then once they were nominated, we first of all included them very much in the whole program. So we wanted to make them feel that they are part of it. They are helping to build this platform. So there was a sense of ownership from them. And we trained them up to make sure that they knew how to build pages, how to update content and so forth. And I think probably we don't do it as often now, but I think the intention is we do sort of have engagement with them either there was a site before where there was a hub champion page that we've created. So the hub champions can actually go there and share information, any best practice that they've done. So it's quite interactive within the hub champions. And we usually have like a catch up with the hub champions as well, just to give them an update on what are some of the new product features that are coming up, how they can actually use it. And we'll also share some, exciting news or guidelines that we've got. So that's how we sort of keep them engaged throughout the year as well.
Oh, thanks, Stephen. That's good. Well, we've got lots more, as Kevin said, we've got lots more questions in the chat, which we thought we will bring over into the next half hour. But we do appreciate that some people can only escape for an hour from their day to day. So if you need to go, then we'll just be finishing off now. I'll hand over to you, Kevin, just to finish this session. It's a shame to interrupt the flow.
Yep. I want to thank all of our guests for their insight and responses to the questions. And thank you to all of you as well for joining us today. We've got just a couple of minutes left before going to our optional overtime session where everyone is invited to engage further and dig deeper into what we've been discussing today. And we'll also be sending out a survey to learn what you thought of this technology exchange, any ideas on how we can improve the experience. Now, however, Nicole is going to tell you about a couple of upcoming events that we think that you might be interested in.
Yeah, just very briefly. So nature of work is a key topic in all of our DWG conversations at the moment. So we're inviting you to join our movement by registering your interest in the Nature of Work Festival, which will be in the autumn. You can also listen to our new podcast on the topic, which is just launched, or buy the book co-authored by DWG's Paul Miller and Shimrit James, which as well as looking beautiful, I have a copy here. Look at how lovely that is. And it explains the themes and ethos, and we posted links into the chat. Now, please join us for overtime. Like I said, we didn't really want to spoil the flow of all those questions we were getting there, but we realized that some people have to go. So for those people, thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you at another event soon. For everybody else, we're now entering overtime, Kevin.
Yes, indeed. We're now entering a less formal part of our program where we can chat about what we just heard and also ask speakers whatever we want, share our views too. Basically, just share. To manage the quality of the audio experience for everyone, we're going to ask you to stay on mute until called upon. And then we'd like you to use the chat panel to let us know what you'd like to ask or say. That way we can coordinate who we call on to keep the conversation flowing.
Okay, so we've, as I said, we've got lots of questions. So I think that there's a couple about integration. So we've got one here. Were there integrations with any other platforms apart from Office 365 that you had to go to?
Yes, I'll take that one. So yes, we do. So for example, the roster widget that was shown before, where the crew can see when they're rostered to go on flights, that was actually integrated with our rostering tool. So hence we're getting the data from the rostering tool, and it also sends a notification if there's a roster change. So we have that. Actually, there's another cool integration that we didn't highlight. We actually have integration with our core HR system as well. So if it's my birthday or my work anniversary, there's actually a banner that comes out on the homepage that says happy birthday or happy work anniversary. So we've got that. So it feels a lot more personalized as well. So we've got that integration as well. Yeah.
And someone asked as well, is there an aim to integrate the employee recognition perks or HR? But that's sort of part of that. Are you leading into other sort of that interaction with employees, or have you got more plans to integrate more things, basically?
We definitely have more plans to integrate. So I'll definitely need to catch up with Matt to see what we can do. As I was saying, I think we're sort of implementing a new training system, learning and training system. I think what would be really cool is that when I go into the hub, I can actually see what are my upcoming learning or training sessions that I've got planned. And yeah, so that kind of integration, I think it will make the employee experience a lot better. So yeah.
So a question for Matt then. You know, the integration roadmap for Unily, do you just take what people want for integration and trying to build that in, or, you know, how does that work?
Well, actually, this is something that we're particularly proud of at Unily around our roadmap. And in fact, what I may do is just very briefly share my screen here and just kind of show you a little bit of this. But ultimately, what we have on our roadmap, we have two kind of key features. So let me just click share on that. So we've got kind of two key elements to our roadmap. The first is something that we call ideation, and it's part of our Universe customer community portal. So this portal is where any Unily customer can log in and they can engage with, you know, guide content and things like that, and with their peers. But more importantly, it includes this ideation feature, which allows customers to submit ideas for our product roadmap, which can then be voted on by the customer community, which then translates into things that end up on the roadmap. So I can say, show me feature or requests that came from ideation. And it might be something small, like they want like a button that they can put on any page for instantly following it. And then what we can do is essentially, take that request, design it up, and deliver it via the product. So our roadmap is very much partnership, and out of the box integrations with our product is covered by that. So recently, in terms of expanding our list of out of the box integrations, we undertook something called the Great Apps Survey with our customer community, which gave them a chance to tell us all the different applications they use. And then we were able to pick the common applications across our customer community and start to build out of the box integrations with them. So that covers a broad number of different applications, but it'd be things like Salesforce, ServiceNow, Slack, Google Workspace is a great deal of work we've done around Google Workspace integration as well, just to name a few. Although it's worth noting that that's not the kind of only route to achieving integrations. You know, while we're trying to add as many of the the common integrations out of the box. There are some which are quite unique to certain clients, and those can always be accommodated too.
Okay, no, thanks, Matt. Thanks.
No worries.
That's really good to see that there's, you know, that feedback where you're sort of closing that loop from what people need as things change. It's about that agile approach that was spoken about earlier, really, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
There is a sort of a bit of a follow-up question to that. Can you integrate with benefit vendors or other external providers? So I guess that's just people putting those bids in and seeing where it takes you or how it gets surfaced to be part of development, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we actually built into the product, you know, fundamentally was an open integration framework predicated on a very modern authentication model. So we support integrations with any kind of web applications that have the appropriate and relevant web APIs exposed, and support the OAuth 2.0 authentication model, which is a highly secure model for the two applications to talk to one another, essentially. So the integration framework is, you know, could loosely be described as limitless in terms of what applications can be kind of integrated. You know, it's all just about setting the appropriate priorities with the different clients.
Okay. Well, thanks. But we've got quite a few more questions coming in, and I know Kevin's teeing them up. But there's a couple of questions about languages. So I don't know if because Carly and Stephen have decided to stay on, even though it's sort of 3 o'clock where you are. I'm much appreciative of that. But have all three of you got any insights about languages or working with languages on the platform? You know, what can it do, and what have you guys done with them, if anything, yet, or is that later on in your roadmap? I'll ask Stephen what he can do, and then we'll split to Cathay to see what they've been doing.
So
Sorry,
I think
first. Sorry, I'll ask Matt first to what you know.
yeah.
No worries. I was going to say, you know, Stephen,
Go for it, Stephen.
it, Stephen. Yeah. So yes, translation and multilingual is a big part of our platform, not just for translating your kind of communications, but for translating whole pages, like even your static information pages, say around COVID and things like that. So the approach is essentially is twofold. We have a built-in AI-based machine translation function. And we also have the option to manually translate any content into dozens of different languages that are configured on a client-by-client basis. So, you know, you would, at the start of the project, tell us what languages you wanted to support. Then you have the option to one-click translate using machine translation, or you can manually translate content into multiple different languages. The final option is that kind of hybrid approach where you machine translate first and then look to make it closer to word perfect by editing after the fact. So, you know, and that covers, as I mentioned, all parts of the product, from navigation to menus to the page content itself through to your news articles. It's all covered by this translation engine.
Okay, Stephen and Carly, does this are you using any of this functionality yet, or is it something you're planning to do?
I don't think we used a lot of this because I think the hub majority is all English. But I think in Japan and probably Korea, they might have some, like maybe 1 or 2 page where they have used different language to present some of the content, but it's still very minimal at the moment.
Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
I know that other people we work with, they start and then they're trying to roll that out later. Sorry, Carly, to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say it's more on the news front, if anything. Places like China, the mainland, yeah, as Stephen mentioned, Japan, Korea, a few of the other Asian countries, they definitely do a lot of the news in their local language. But I will say it's very much at a manual point at the moment. So, you know, maybe the next stage for them is looking at more the automated approach.
Oh, thank you for that. That's great. Kevin, anything else in the chat that we can?
Oh, we have something coming from the audience, a question and a follow-up on our favorite topic, which was migration. Specifics, how many pieces of content that you had to review, And how long did it take to complete that migration process, to review it, write the content, upload the content? How many staff members did it take to do this? What kind of army did you have to make this happen? That's the question.
We do.
Simmons, do you want
Sure,
do you want to talk about that?
So it's okay. It's interesting for us because we sort of did it in a phase approach. So we didn't go out in one big bang. So we did it in phase approach. Our first rollout was basically content that was relevant for the whole enterprise. So they weren't department specific sort of content. And for that one, I think so. Kali, we had about 3 content writers, I think, that we hired for part-time to help with rewriting of content and also helping to review content.
Yeah, those people were solely focused on just content ready for the basically.
And how many pieces of content was that for? I mean, I'm thinking it was thousands, right?
Yeah, it would have been.
Can't give you an exact number, but
Too
yeah,
many.
it was thousands. I mean, yeah, but basically, as we said, building a new stuff. It was from ground zero.
This is a question that I always ask in any content migration, and that is, what percentage of the content were you able to eliminate? Was it? I've heard 70, I've heard 60. Sometimes you hear 80. For you, what was your experience? What percentage of content were you able to leave behind?
I would say 60 to 70% probably. I remember there was a lot of content that was redundant actually when we went through the master list.
Even more, I would say slightly more even, because I guess you got to bear in mind, I mean, this intranet that existed was like 20 years old. So we were starting with from a whole new perspective, right? Of just, the information architecture that sat there. We wanted to map out the whole, employee experience from recruitment through to farewell, and that kind of, I guess, positioned the whole site for us. We've got a section that's called My Cathay, and that was everything from scratch. So the nature of the content was just very, very different. So I think, close 70 to 80% of it was gone.
And that's where an internet becomes like an archive as well, doesn't it, really? And you've got people not wanting to get rid of it because it's like, but we've always had that and just want it there just in case and all that.
And what we did do as well with the news, I mean, a lot of the news obviously was outdated from the 90s or the 80s or whenever it was, but we did go through a process, and I think our period was 3 years before we launched. We reviewed all of that news and we selected the key pieces that we wanted to migrate over, and that was a whole nother piece of work to upload that. Just for purposes of archive, as you said, just so we don't lose that content.
Just I've got a question, Kevin. I don't know if you so using other comms channels, someone's asked if you've got other comms channels as well as the hub, and if so, what are they? And then that maybe leads into Matt, because you can explain a little bit about what Unily can do as well as the straightforward site building. So do you want one of you, I guess that's you, Carly, go first on that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, as I said from the start, the hub is definitely our glue and the one-stop shop where we want everyone going. In an ideal world, they open up the hub in the morning, afternoon, and end of day, right? But we do have other channels that we use, so we do rely quite heavily on email for important updates that have to go to employees. We do a lot of e-newsletters as well. We've also got social media. Whilst we don't use that heavily, we do have plans to look at that integration with the hub. So those are our kind of key digital channels, I would say. And then we've got a host of your offline channels as well. You know, from posters to digital screens to, you know, your physical space around the building, say, and all of those the other offline spaces that we use around buildings.
Thanks, Carly.
Carly, I came from a communications background as well, and I remember when I was in communications, one of the biggest challenges was that everyone, of course, felt that their message was the most important message that everyone in the organization needs to hear. And so much of our time was spent negotiating or talking with people and helping them get to the right place. How has this new system, with the ability to be able to target messaging to different personas, has that been a help in managing those content producers?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like we have guidelines and governance on how we do this, and a big part of it is education, right? You know, what's the right content for different groups? You know, some people think that their content's really important and needs to go to everyone, whereas, you know, looking at it from a comms perspective, you might argue something differently. So it's definitely helped us. And I think the great thing about the hub is we have our core news and articles that we can post, but if something like, let's just say, an IT update, we don't have to have a news article about that. You can have a little, what we call, news ticker that runs across the top of the page, right? Which is just, okay, there's going to be an outage of so-and-so system today. So there's different ways that we can, I suppose, position and place news across the hub. And that's really helped us. I mentioned push notifications to people's mobiles before, another really great tool for us that we use, or feature rather. So yeah, there's different ways to do it for sure.
So on that, Matt, can you explain a little bit about that sort of functionality that Unily has that can help with that? And then after that, we've got a bit of a question about the percentage usage of desktop and mobile, which sort of links in there. So I don't know if you've got some stats about your client base, Matt, but then that obviously then you can dig into Carly and Stephen about their experience on that side of things as well. But
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm just going to put my screen up just for 1 second, because I think there's a couple of things that are probably worth calling out. I think firstly, I loaded up the site and I just kind of switched it into a mobile view, so our audience today can get a feel for what what frontline workers might experience via the mobile app. So, you know, a kind of comms homepage, for example, with content for you, maybe even trending content. One of the things that we actually deliver via the app itself, which unfortunately you can't access via a browser, but you can via a mobile app, is a feature called offline reading. So actually, and this was in large done as part of a kind of method to engage those highly disconnected workers, such as, you know, cabin crew at 30,000 feet, and it allows through our platform for those people to download their news articles into their mobile app. So it's not necessarily been switched on, for all clients, but it is available to all clients that think that's a useful tool. And it kind of aligns to consumer trends. If anybody here has the Netflix app, for example, on their phone when they're traveling or anything like that, and it's like you can download your favorite shows for later. I guess our vision or our hope is that those frontline staff are downloading their internal comms articles onto their phone and getting that out instead. So that's another lofty aspiration for anybody out there with frontline staff. So the offline reading thing, I think, is quite interesting, especially when you talk about frontline workers. And the other thing I would draw on is our broadcast center, which allows you to kind of use pre-configured templates to design emails and send them out to your internal audiences. Here I'm just showing one template, which is kind of like a comms roundup style email, and it has, your latest articles. Then it also has a section which is personalized to the user as well. So it's actually able to draw on the preferences of a user in the system and compile that into an email, which is then, delivers unique content to each individual receiving that same email. So the layout might be the same, but the content within that email will be different for each person. So kind of taking the ability to personalize comms feeds, but then kind of pushing that through to the email side of things as well. And this is all kind of built with a flexible set of kind of rows and lightweight configuration. So you can kind of just click into this and you can see you've got your pick from your brand colors, setting header logos, filling in text. And then when it comes to articles, you can literally no copy and paste, you just pick them from the system. So it kind of does away with the old school approach of kind of a copy and paste this news article title and description into this email sender, put a link at the bottom. It all gets wrapped up, and then it's also, of course, covered by the analytics of our platform and drives people back into the system. So how do you re-engage, over time, nurturing employee engagement by what we describe it as, going to where your users are. You start by creating a trusted portal that they can visit on demand, and then you can also look to reach out to them in the other systems that they operate across and bring them back to the hub through things like email. So just a couple of features that I thought it might be nice just to kind of talk about or show there, within our demo site today.
Yeah, that's really helpful because it shows that it's just not more than just pages. There's more functionality there as well, which people might not be aware of. Just on that, thinking about the mobile and desktop sort of split, how have you found that amongst it? Obviously, I expect mobile is growing, but is it growing really quickly or much quicker since the last year? Or what's your gut feeling there, Matt? And then we'll ask Carly how you're finding that in your organization.
It's a great question. So actually, one of the things we can do to help our clients is look at these kind of broad trends that kind of anonymized across our entire client base. What is mobile adoption for people using the Unily system? And I think at the moment, broadly speaking, it's somewhere in the region of 3 to 4% of the kind of page views, for example, are coming through mobile devices, which isn't necessarily that surprising. However, we are seeing that number rapidly increasing, as you mentioned, and that trend is really actually, started from about the beginning of this year. So I think it's taken a while for us to see that kind of growth in mobile adoption, because I think, pre-pandemic, it was maybe treated as a nice to have kind of, it looks great in mobile as well. And then there were organizations like Cathay and others that really focused on it and said, well, we need to make sure the mobile piece of the platform is all singing, all dancing, just as good as the desktop. But now I think that balance is shifting, and more organizations are paying attention to the opportunity to engage even your desk workers. I mean, even myself, for example, I catch myself eating lunch and I'll get my phone out and I'll read stories from our own intranet, and there's been some really great ones actually recently from some people internally have posted some great blogs recently about being a digital workplace leader and things like that, which I've just been, really interested in, and I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, so you're a model student for someone like Carly who works in communication.
Easily suckered in.
Yeah. What about you guys then?
Yeah.
You've got such a mobile workforce anyway, but
yeah. I mean, that was our principle, right? And building mobile first. So very different approach. You see the stats here really vary across different audience groups. So for pilots on the one extreme, I think you see 70 to 80%. Sorry, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong here, but 70 to 80% of them view mobile versus desktop. And then you come to head office and you get 70% or so on desktop and 30% on mobile. Cabin crew is about 50-50. It just really depends on the audience group, but you definitely notice those differences.
Okay. Kevin, there was another question later on.
We've got a question here from Hans, and what he's asking about content and to what extent at Cathay Pacific you plan proactively your user content.
So is that when you say user content is in just proactive news and information?
I think
that's what we're getting at.
probably both. You know,
Okay.
in the news and the messaging, of course, but also, do you also have a proactive content plan for the non-news, for the more evergreen things that you have?
Definitely. Yeah. We have a full editorial calendar that we look at weekly, daily, and plan out. We've got different slots in terms of how we post news. If you're reactive and proactive, that is 8 a.m, 12 p.m, and 5 p.m. Just if anyone's interested, that's just how we manage things. It just helps to make things a bit easier at our end, but also looking at the time at which people visit the hub, which is helpful. So yes, you've got to keep that constant flow of information. I think that's key. For us, it's finding that balance of letting things cycle on the homepage, you know, giving that a couple of days or a bit of breathing space before it kind of pushes into the archive. So we do balance that quite carefully.
Very good, very good. Do you have a blogging presence at Cathay Pacific?
You know what? Because we're a travel company, we launched an area of the hub called Footprints, which is all about travel content, which, you know, obviously, unfortunately, now is not being the best part of the site, but that was supposed to be user-generated content, and that launched really well. And we certainly have ambitions to continue that once COVID is behind us. But as I mentioned before, that whole kind of leadership piece is an area that we want to get into and do more of, and that's where I think the blogs and, again, user-generated content can come into effect much more heavily.
Thank you very much.
We've not got very much time left, but I just wanted to speak to Matt, really. So, you know, we've had lots of questions all about comms and content, and people that come to our events are really interested in sort of the nuts and bolts and how they can manage their sites and what products can do for them and how they're going to, you know, manage it on a day-to-day basis. Now, I know that you have got lots of good input about how the system works in the back end and all the functionality. So how can people find out more about that? Obviously, you've got your event later on in the year. Is there anywhere else that you would point people to look out, you know, if they want more demos? Because, you know, we didn't have that much, good, because we've got so many questions, but we didn't have that much time to do an actual demo of the system. But I know you do those other times, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things I'd say to all the participants today. First and foremost, I'm glad that you focused on getting all the great insights out of Carly and Stephen, because, you know, there's plenty of time to look at the product, to look at the demo, but not as much opportunity to speak to people like this who have been there, done it, and have these like lessons from the front line. So I'm glad there was lots of opportunity to talk to them and share their insights. If you are interested in learning more about the product and kind of what it does, I think a great starting point is unily.com. You will see a kind of breakdown of the features of our product as a starting point. You'll also find kind of written case studies and video case studies, which will kind of, again, provide you more insights, especially if, for instance, you're looking for things specific to your vertical, your industry. You might find other case studies that really help kind of bring this to life for you. And then otherwise, you know, you can contact myself via LinkedIn or contact us via the Unily website. And, you know, we're happy to kind of talk to you about the product and showcase more of the functionality there too. So, yeah, just keep the conversation going and contact us however works for you.
Thanks so much, Matt. Thank you.
No,
Shall we call it a wrap, Nicole?
Well, I think we better. That's us practically at time. So I think so. So we hope this was a valuable session. Thanks everybody that stayed on. You know, we always like to have quite a deep sort of discussion at the end, but as ever, there's still never enough time. So hopefully we'll provide some more resources, and you can follow up with us or follow up with Unily and find everybody on LinkedIn. So please fill in the survey so we can learn what you thought, and also add any ideas to help us improve the technology exchanges. And we hope you join us for another DWG event, and certainly Institute event sometime soon. Thanks very much for joining us.